Hi, class. This week I'm co-presenting with Mary Ellen on The Poet X, and I'm handling the content portion of the show here, even though I'm sure there's going to be some overlap there. This is by Elizabeth Acevedo, and just before I get into the presentation, just my personal thoughts on it. I greatly enjoyed this book, both in its print format as well as the audio version. I think they both brought something different to the table. Visually, the book was quite nice. A little bit more on the cover art later, and some controversy around there. My binding was a little flimsy on my book and had some damage. Overall, it felt really great. Nice paper, good size, even though the poems being relatively short kept you moving. That really felt like a satisfying read as well, and I could see that being even more appealing from a young adult audience, um, kind of graduating into a novel or a book of this size maybe. Um, just personally, I found a lot to relate here to, even if I may not be a person who fits the exact sort of like target audience of which Acevedo might have had had in mind for this book. But I think for anybody that has felt like they didn't belong, or anybody that felt uncomfortable in their body, or anybody that felt like maybe their thoughts weren't their own, or that they were being kind of forced to believe something that didn't quite feel comfortable, could find a lot to relate here too. Anybody that's found solace in art, or anybody that's looking to kind of develop their own voice, has a lot to relate to, and we'll get a little bit more into that and with the themes here. So I just want to hop right in. So here's our slide presentation. So this is The Poet X, again by Elizabeth Acevedo. Cover art by Gabriel Moreno, as well as Amanda Rivas. More on that later. And my name is James O'Connor. So just a quick recap of Poet X. Acevedo also did the audio version, which again was quite delightful. And this was published by HarperTeen. This is a division of HarperCollins Publishers in March of 2018. Kirkus has this categorized under teens and young adult fiction, as well as teens and young adult novels in verse. So, what is a novel in verse? Well, HarperCollins defines this as a narrative that uses the rhythm, imagery, and style of poetry to develop characters, make meaning, and tell a story within the structure of a novel. So, pretty straightforward. But this one tells the story of 15-year-old Xiomara Batista. She's a first-generation Dominican living in Harlem, and she is writing her own story in verse, largely through the journal that her brother has gifted her. Uh, During the course of the story, she is finding her own voice while figuring out her body, boys, religion, and her strained relationship with her family. In particular, she has an abusive but possibly somewhat sympathetic mother, and I'll kind of leave that up for you to decide and talk about whether the mother ultimately was a sympathetic character or not. Um, so, five kind of fun, quick facts about Acevedo. She's also written With the Fire on High, which was named Best Book by the New York Public Library, School Library Journal, NPR, and others, as well as Clap When You Land. This was a Boston Globe Horn Book Honor Book and a Kirkus finalist. She was named Young Person's Poet Laureate by the Poetry Foundation in 2022. She holds degrees in both performance arts and creative writing from George Washington University and the University of Maryland, respectively. She's a national poetry slam champion, and she first performed at age 15 at her first spoken word poetry slam in the influential Nuyorican Poets Cafe. So, character roundup. Siamara is our protagonist. Much is left to our imagination with her physical attributes, but we get a great sense of how Siamara, which I refer to as X through the presentation frequently, sees herself. A poet through and through, but she's one that's finding their own voice in a life that's determined, or so it seems, to silence and objectify her, but for a few key characters here. Xavier is her brother. She refers to him lovingly as twin, even though she criticizes his twin abilities. Uh, Twin is the family's favorite child, even though they don't really know all of his secrets either. He's a genius and attends a school for the gifted, where he is much freer to be his true self than he is at home. And Xavier's secret that we all know is that he's homosexual, and he has to keep this from his parents, who they, or mostly the mom, who they believe would rain down brimstone on him for this. And that's mommy. That's Altagracia Batista. She could be described as the main antagonist of the story. In addition to maybe some societal roles as well being antagonistic. She's overly determined to make sure X does not make the same mistake she did, but in doing so, she seems like she has really bordered into substantial abuse. Poppy, just Poppy, we don't really know too much about him. He's present without really being so. We know that he used to love to dance and music, and is at least widely accused of being somewhat of a reformed philanderer or playboy type. And again, he kind of comes around. We see a bit by the end, but doesn't really get developed too much. Other key characters are their friends, Caradad, who's a friend, as a daughter of friends of the family, who is about their age, and attends a religious private school. So there's this kind of fun dynamic where the three main kind of kids in the story all don't attend the same school, which I thought was kind of interesting. Amon, which is ultimately Ziamara's love interest. Father Sean, who plays a really critical role both in the beginning as well as the resolution, in getting the family to kind of sit down. And even though X ultimately questions her faith, she still finds solace as well as support in the church, which I found quite moving. Miss Galliano, who is a small, slight woman who holds herself quite large and is ultimately the one that encourages Siamaro to join the poetry club as well as seek out these poetry slams, and is really a key, wonderful voice in the story. Um, Almost no drawbacks in her character. Really, really wonderful. Well, no drawbacks. Also, Isabel from the and the other kids in the poetry club also are a good support system for her. And Xavier's boyfriend Cody is also another key character in this. Well, maybe key is overextending that, but definitely important to Xavier anyway. So, major themes here. One of the first major tensions that we see is between Siamara and how her body is received by the world, or at least perceived, and how she is sort of acted upon. We see her move from an object in the beginning to much more of a subject in her own right throughout the story, and I thought that was a really wonderful journey. Siamara also faces pressure to complete her confirmation, her Catholic confirmation, when she says the only thing that's confirmed here is her skepticism for religion, her quote doubt, as she puts it. Poet X also explores issues of trust and worthiness, particularly between Twin and Siamara. There's a really moving poem about whether you are, deserving of yourself, let alone your sibling as well, and kind of questioning that. But also between Amon and others, as well as on the greater societal level, we see these sort of trust issues and worthiness, and um, what is she good for, and particularly in relationship to, say, the church. What are kind of all women good for to that institution. There's numerous questions about the value and presence of quality representation, speaking of the church, particularly for black and brown girls. She says that none of the saints, Jesus, God, even Mary, just does not look like her. The only person that is held up that she's supposed to act like is Mary, who is likely a young, scared girl. And that's a very powerful image that CMR is, or contrast that CMR is drawing there between herself and at least who she's put forth as or who has been put forth as a representative for her to emulate. Um, we see X's strong connection to music and the catharsis of art as another major theme. There are also numerous forms of oppression, such as the way that twins' homosexuality is hidden from the family, the way that Aman is a beautiful ice skater but was never encouraged to take lessons by his father, kind of speaking to some of the ways that gender roles can limit people, as well as sort of the effects of intersectionality on talent and self worth. Um, the theme of religious indoctrination is through and through the entire story, and really ownership over another's life as well as ownership over your own life and what that means. And just this one quote, I just want to draw attention to the one quote on this. The unfolding of your words gives light, it gives understanding to the simple. And even though Siamaro's own relationship with religion is very conflicted, she's still able to find wisdom and solace in much of the verses that she has been, kind of forced to learn throughout her life. And I just thought that really showed a mature relationship to to this own this own past that she had, and yeah. So I just thought this was very interesting. The Nuyorican roots of spoken word poetry. I'm seeing I have an extra exclamation mark or not quotation mark there. Nuyorican is a portmanteau of Nueva York and Puerto Rican. Um, and remember how Acevedo participated in her first poetry slam at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe? Well, this cafe, which is located on the Lower East Side of Manhattan and was founded in 1973, um, not only served a critical role in Acevedo's life, but also served a critical role in providing a space for Nuyorican artists to develop their own voices, as well as the modern phenomenon of spoken word poetry. And so while we've been, we humans have been engaging in spoken word poetry for thousands of years, the way it's packaged today and the way it's presented in the book really had its roots and development in and out of this cafe. And I just thought that was very interesting, reading more on that. So I'm sharing a New York Times article, the early days of the New York Poets Cafe, that I just thought was enlightening on something that I've enjoyed, but wasn't quite sure on where the roots really were on that. So poetic forms and devices used. There is a lot, but just touching on some of them. Alliteration is used a fair amount throughout, as well as an anaphora is repetition of beginning words or phrases for deliberate emphasis. One of the most salient ones of this is the In a Man's Arms poem, where she just repeats that constantly. It is just a gorgeous expression of what that like young love that's so bottled up and undirected and discovering yourself. And I really just thought that it was a beautiful scene, and appreciated the handling of that. A contrapuntal. This is the at the New York City at the New York City wide slam near the end of the book is described as a contrapuntal, and in the audiobook, Acevedo explains and delivers a couple different versions of this. But it's when two or more poems can be interwoven to create one, and can be arranged in multiple ways. Also a haiku. These are unrhymed poems consisting of three lines, grouped in 5, 7, and 5 syllables. She also used a lot of metaphors. How your lips are staples that pierce me quick and hard was one in particular that just kind of stuck with me. She used not a ton, but a fair amount of rhetorical questioning as well. One that sort of stuck with me was the difference between what a kind of capital C confession was and a lowercase c confession, when she was questioning out loud, her beliefs to Father Sean, and kind of got reprimanded, and then was questioned like, oh, wasn't that a confession? Um, isn't he bound by secrecy here? And like what the difference is between sitting in a booth and questioning this versus questioning this in class. What where are the lines in that one? And a simile that I thought was just a nice one was, I held the secret of meeting Amon like a candle that could too easily be blown out. Um, And again, I just, all these feelings of kind of young love and things like that, really were quite kind of visceral for me here. Um, so one thing that I was planning on featuring Gabrielle Morano's work a bit more through this presentation, and then I stumbled onto just kind of an interesting controversy um, where he copied almost exactly the photograph by Amanda Rivas here to create this art and did not credit her photography in the course of doing that. And it took, this was published in March of 2018. I believe in July of 2019 is when this kind of came to light. It was brought to Amanda's attention that her photo was used in this way. Somebody even made I believe it was Amanda, even made a animated GIF to fade the one photo into the other just to prove the point home. Freckles, gap in the teeth, everything is the same, and it was kind of incredible. What was really nice was Acevedo and Harper were very cool about this whole thing. I was unable to find if Amanda has received any direct compensation, but in previous in revised editions of this text, she is now credited as one of the um, co cover jacket artists as well, and so that was really nice, and so Acevedo did her best on Twitter as well to make sure that she was credited and that her own photography was acknowledged. So I thought that was even though it was not the greatest story starting out, it seems to have had a bit of a happy ending. And just out of sake of the spirit of things, I just want to shout out Amanda's own Instagram profile here if people are interested in checking out her art. Also linked to her direct website in the references. So just some questions to kind of consider in closing. I always is kind of think it's fun in a story to consider what's in a name. Siamaro was was she destined to live up to her name or not? Um, of of the bringer of war in a way. Um, and Xavier it means bright, and I was just curious if anybody else spotted any other interesting names that might mean anything throughout the story. Um, so besides mommy, and I'm interested in what your thoughts are if she is or not, but who, if anyone, are really the antagonists of the story here? Um, and in what way does the story being told through verse affect the delivery of the narrative? A lot of people kind of have a love it or leave it response with this sort of style, and I'm just curious where you fall on the scheme of things. What other major themes did you observe in this title? I know I sort of just scratched the surface as far as some of the more major themes go. And yeah, I'll share the rest of these in the chat, but I just want to draw attention just to the last one. Um, what should we make of Mommy's unresolved abuse? This harsh backhand for using a tampon, or the pulling of X's hair back to face Mary. In that very kind of like pointed scene, or the more sort of psychological elements of forcing like religious indoctrination upon your children. Um, Personally, as part of this presentation, I sought kind of far and wide for a while on the internet trying to find resources that might be available to people that have experienced this kind of abuse and consistently came up short. So, just in general, I wanted to call attention to this question and ask if anybody was aware of any resources for people. It occurred to me that in a book like this, an analogous sort of abuse, there might be some type of trigger warning. I was wondering what your thoughts were on if that should be present or not, if that was maybe enough to quote trigger somebody's feelings on that has been abused in that way, and if there's any resources available. Again, I would appreciate having those at hand. And especially if we were, as a librarian had a teen come up to us for that, it would be nice to have some, resources available. So, um, So one more fun thing I just thought would be neat. If you feel inclined, we could write our own haiku or contrapuntal, and I decided that I would go first. Um, like most great poems, Poet X's brevity speaks endless volumes. With few words spoken, there is much to imagine amid the silence. Readers, left to think, left to feel, left to wonder, write the rest themselves. So again, thank you very much. I just want to leave you with one of my favorite lines from this book, and it perfectly sums up the way that I feel about this title as well. It was just a poem, but it felt more like a gift. So thank you, class, for sticking with me here, and thank you, Elizabeth Acevedo, for the gift of this poem, The Poet X. I'll share my resources in my link as well as a copy of my slides. So thank you very much. Have a great night.